We often wait for motivation to strike like a lightning bolt. We wait for the perfect day, the perfect mood, or the perfect situation to start something meaningful. But the truth is motivation is fleeting and consistency is deliberate. If you rely on how you feel, you'll never make it. But if you train yourself to show up, even when it's hard, you'll separate yourself from almost everyone else. The greatest mistake people make is assuming that those who achieve more are somehow more talented, more inspired, or more disciplined by nature. That's rarely the case. The secret isn't in the spark, it's in the repetition. The breakthrough doesn't come from a single moment of passion. It comes from the daily decision to show up, put in the work, and get better by 1% every day. That's it. Nothing fancy, nothing magical. Just the grit to keep going. Let's take a closer look at why consistency is so powerful. When you engage in something regularly, whether it's writing, running, studying, or even building relationships, what you're really doing is shaping your identity. You're not just developing a habit, you're building the kind of person you are. And that's what separates temporary effort from lasting transformation. People who succeed in any field have learned to force themselves to be consistent, especially when they don't feel like it. There's something incredibly powerful about showing up when it's uncomfortable. Anyone can keep going when things are exciting or new. But when the novelty fades and progress is slow, that's when most people quit. And that's exactly where you need to double down. It's not about grinding yourself into exhaustion. It's about building trust with yourself. Every time you keep your promise, you signal to your mind, I can count on me. Here's a truth most people overlook: discipline isn't natural, it's developed. And the most reliable way to develop it is to remove choice from the equation. Don't negotiate with yourself. Don't wait to feel like doing it. Instead, create structure, set boundaries, build routines, and follow through. Even small actions done consistently stack up in powerful ways. Over time, they become habits, and habits become who you are. But consistency isn't about perfection. It's about resilience. You will fall off track. You will miss a day or mess up. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. The goal isn't to never fail. The goal is to bounce back faster. Successful people aren't perfect. They just refuse to stay down. They show up again and again and again. And that's what I challenge you to do. Force yourself to be consistent. Not because it's easy or glamorous, but because it's worth it. Because the real growth, the real success, the real power, it all lies on the other side of repetition. You don't need more motivation. You need more movement. Start small, stay consistent, and trust the process. The results will come, but only if you do. 5 keynotes of the speech: consistency matters more than motivation, because motivation fades while consistency builds momentum and results. Repetition creates identity. The more consistently you engage in a behavior, the more it defines who you are. Discipline is developed through structure, not inspiration. Removing choice from daily tasks helps build unshakable routines. Success isn't about perfection, but resilience. Being consistent means bouncing back quickly after setbacks. Small daily actions compound over time, leading to massive growth when repeated with intentional consistency. Most people wait for motivation to act. They wait for that rush of inspiration, that surge of energy, that right moment to begin working on their goals. But the truth is, motivation is unreliable. It's inconsistent. It comes and goes depending on your mood, your environment, your energy levels, or even the weather outside. If you build your habits or your success strategy around waiting to feel motivated, then you're setting yourself up for long periods of inaction. That's why consistency is far more important than motivation. Motivation is emotional, but consistency is a commitment. It's not about how you feel. It's about what you've decided. Motivation is like the wind. It can blow hard one day and disappear the next. It's exciting when it's there, but it can't be counted on. Consistency, on the other hand, is like gravity. It may not always feel exciting, but it's dependable. It shows up every day, pulling you forward little by little. When you commit to consistent action, you're no longer at the mercy of your emotions. You don't need to feel like doing something. You just do it because you've made a decision that this is what matters. That shift in mindset changes everything. It moves you from being reactive to being intentional. And that's the first real step toward long-term success. Think of any great athlete, artist, leader, or innovator. They didn't become exceptional because they were constantly motivated. They became exceptional because they showed up again and again, even when they didn't feel like it. They practiced when it was boring. They trained when they were tired. They kept learning, improving, and repeating their process even on the days when it seemed pointless. That's consistency in action. And over time, that kind of effort compounds. Each day builds on the one before it. It's not about the massive wins. It's about the small, repeated actions that slowly carve out excellence. Most people overestimate what they can do in a week and underestimate what they can do in a year. That's the cost of chasing motivation. They sprint hard when the excitement is high, then burn out or quit the moment it fades. But the people who understand the power of consistency don't need a rush. They play the long game. They know that showing up every day, no matter how small the step, is what separates progress from procrastination. Consistency might not look impressive in the short term, but over time, it beats bursts of energy every single time. There's also a psychological shift that happens when you start acting consistently. You begin to see yourself differently. You go from saying, I want to be someone who works hard, to I am someone who works hard. That identity shift is powerful. Your actions begin to reinforce your self-image, and the stronger your identity, the more naturally your behaviors follow. But that identity doesn't come from big speeches or declarations. It comes from what you do on ordinary days when no one is watching, when it would be easier to quit. And when you act consistently, even without motivation, you're building self-trust. You're proving to yourself that you can rely on your own decisions. That kind of internal trust is rare, and it's powerful because once you start trusting yourself to follow through, you don't need to rely on willpower alone. It becomes easier to do hard things because you've done them before. You've shown up when it wasn't convenient, and that builds a quiet kind of confidence that doesn't need to be loud. It just is. So instead of chasing inspiration, create systems. Design your days around habits, routines, and disciplines that support your goals, whether or not you feel like it. Give yourself permission to do the work imperfectly, but never to skip it entirely. The results will come not from the occasional big effort, but from the quiet power of repetition. Consistency doesn't guarantee immediate rewards, but it guarantees eventual progress. It doesn't promise excitement every day, but it promises transformation over time. Consistency is the bridge between where you are and where you want to be. Motivation may help you take the first step, but only consistency will carry you all the way. Repetition does more than just build skill. It shapes identity. Every time you do something consistently, even if it's small, you're casting a vote for the type of person you are becoming. Identity isn't something you suddenly wake up with. It's not created by declarations, affirmations, or wishes. It's formed through action. When you show up day after day, putting in the work, the effort, and the attention, even when it's uncomfortable or inconvenient, you're not just making progress in the task itself, you're reinforcing a belief about who you are. And that belief becomes powerful because it's earned, not imagined. People often try to change their behavior without changing the way they see themselves. They say, I want to be productive, or I want to be healthy. But if their daily actions don't align with that vision, the identity never takes root. On the other hand, someone who decides, I am the kind of person who finishes what I start, and then follows that with consistent behavior, no matter how small, is gradually building that identity layer by layer. It's not about doing extraordinary things once in a while. It's about doing ordinary things regularly until they become a natural part of who you are. The power of repetition is that it sends signals to your brain. When you repeatedly take certain actions, you begin to wire your mind to recognize those actions as part of your default behavior. That's how habits are formed, and more importantly, that's how identity is constructed. You're essentially training your brain to associate yourself with specific behaviors, whether it's discipline, focus, creativity, resilience, or commitment. Every repeated action is like a thread that weaves into the fabric of your character, strengthening your belief in your own potential. Think about someone who wants to be a writer. Writing one great piece out of nowhere doesn't make them a writer. What makes them a writer is sitting down to write every day, even if it's just a paragraph, even if it's bad. Through repetition, they not only sharpen their craft, but start to see themselves differently. They start thinking like a writer, behaving like a writer, and eventually being a writer. The same is true in every field. Repetition is what moves an action from a task to a trait. It transitions you from doing something to being someone. Identity built through repetition is also more sustainable because it's not based on external validation. You're not depending on applause, likes, or approval. You're grounded in your own behavior. You know who you are because your actions have proven it to you again and again. That kind of inner certainty is hard to shake. Even when things get tough, it gives you a compass to return to, a sense of direction that doesn't waver with public opinion or temporary failures. Another powerful aspect of repetition is the psychological momentum it builds. Once you do something enough times, it becomes less about pushing yourself and more about maintaining who you are. That's when things begin to feel effortless. Not because they're easy, but because they're aligned with your identity. When being disciplined becomes part of your story, you're less likely to skip important actions. You don't question whether or not to follow through. You simply do because that's who you are. And when repetition forms identity, it also changes the way you handle challenges. You stop looking at problems as reasons to quit. Instead, they become part of the journey. If you're someone who sees yourself as resilient, then setbacks don't define you. They refine you. That mental resilience doesn't come from one or two big achievements. It comes from showing up every day, no matter the circumstances, and proving to yourself that you can do hard things repeatedly. Every consistent action is like a vote for the type of person you want to be. One vote doesn't decide the outcome, but enough votes day after day shift the balance. You begin to embody your values rather than just aspire to them. That's the quiet strength of repetition. It transforms your identity from the inside out. Over time, without needing to force belief, you naturally start to see yourself as capable, committed, and consistent. And that's where the real transformation begins. Discipline is not something people are born with. It's not a genetic trait or an inherited advantage. Discipline is a skill, and like any skill, it can be developed over time through structure, repetition, and intention. The reason many people struggle with discipline is because they rely too much on feelings and too little on systems. When you remove choice from the equation and build structure into your daily life, you eliminate the need to negotiate with yourself. That's when discipline becomes real. It stops being an emotional decision and becomes a functional habit. When you wake up in the morning and ask yourself, do I feel like working out today? Or do I feel like studying? You're setting yourself up to fail. Feelings are unpredictable, and your brain will often take the path of least resistance. It's wired for comfort, not growth. But when you've already decided that at 700 a.m. and you exercise, or that every evening from 1600 to 1800 you study, there's no debate. It becomes a rule, a part of your routine, and eventually a piece of who you are. That kind of structure frees you from decision fatigue. Instead of using energy to decide whether or not to act, you use that energy to focus on doing the work. Building discipline begins with designing your environment in a way that supports your goals. You don't rely on willpower to push through distractions. You arrange your surroundings to limit them. You set specific times to perform specific tasks. You plan your day with clarity. You use reminders, schedules, routines, and habits to keep you on track. These tools are not just for productivity, they're the building blocks of consistency. When your day has a predictable rhythm, your brain adapts, it stops fighting the process and starts flowing with it. Routines are powerful because they automate discipline. You don't need to feel inspired to do what's already part of your system. For example, brushing your teeth isn't a decision you wrestle with, it's automatic. The same can happen with reading, writing, working, exercising, or practicing any craft. But this only happens when the behavior is built into your schedule. The consistency of the schedule reinforces the habit, and the habit reinforces your sense of discipline. The real power in discipline comes when you can perform the necessary actions, not just when you're at your best, but also when you're tired, distracted, frustrated, or uninspired. That's the test of a structured mind. People who appear extremely disciplined have just learned how to rely on systems rather than motivation. They've made key behaviors non-negotiable. It's not that they're always full of energy or willpower. It's that they've removed the option to skip. This mindset shift changes everything. It eliminates excuses and replaces them with action. Another key aspect of discipline is accountability. Structure is not just about what you do alone. It's also about how you make yourself responsible. Some people use accountability partners. Some use journaling. Some use progress tracking apps. The tool doesn't matter. What matters is that you have a way to measure whether or not you are showing up for yourself. When you see your progress clearly, you are more likely to stay on track. When you know you'll be checking in on your goals, you are more likely to follow through. Accountability systems add a layer of structure that strengthens discipline even further. It's important to understand that discipline doesn't have to be extreme to be effective. You don't need to overhaul your entire life in 1 week. In fact, that approach usually backfires. Real discipline comes from small, deliberate steps taken with consistency. You build one habit at a time, one block of structure at a time, and eventually those blocks become a solid foundation. You learn to trust yourself. You learn to act without overthinking, and you learn to finish what you start. The more you practice disciplined behavior within a structured system, the easier it becomes to scale that discipline into other areas of life. What starts as a workout routine turns into better time management. What starts as a writing habit turns into clearer thinking. The structure you build in one area creates ripple effects everywhere else. And each time you follow through, each time you respect the boundaries you've set for yourself, you reinforce the belief that you can do hard things without being told, without being pushed, and without needing the perfect mood. That's not just structure. That's strength. And it's built one consistent decision at a time. Success is not about never making mistakes or never failing. It's about what you do after you fall. The idea that you have to be perfect in order to be successful is a myth that holds many people back. Perfection is not only unrealistic, it's also unnecessary. What truly matters is resilience, the ability to recover quickly, to bounce back, and to keep going even after setbacks. Consistency is not measured by how flawlessly you perform, but by how willing you are to return to your path after being knocked off it. The people who succeed are not the ones who never stumble, but the ones who refuse to stay down for long. Setbacks are a part of every journey. Life doesn't unfold in a straight line, and progress never happens without resistance. You will miss a workout. You will have days where your productivity drops. You will lose focus, make mistakes, or fall short of your own standards. But none of that defines your future unless you let it. What defines your future is your response to those moments. Will you stay discouraged? Will you convince yourself that the failure means you're not good enough? Or will you get back up and try again the next day? That decision is where real success begins. When you train yourself to be consistent, you're also training your mind to be flexible and forgiving. You begin to understand that a bad day doesn't mean a bad week, and a bad week doesn't mean failure. You stop throwing everything away just because you slipped once. Instead of thinking in terms of perfection, you start thinking in terms of patterns. One missed step doesn't ruin your progress. Giving up does. Resilience is the art of continuing. It's the discipline of starting again without shame, without delay, and without overanalyzing every mistake. There's also power in emotional control when you're building resilience. Many people take failure personally. They internalize it. They make it about who they are instead of what happened. But resilience means separating the event from your identity. You can fail at something and still be capable. You can make a poor choice and still be strong. You can fall short of your goal and still be worthy of achieving it. That mindset allows you to approach setbacks with logic instead of emotion. You become solution-oriented, you learn, you adapt, you keep showing up. Resilience also means knowing the difference between guilt and responsibility. Guilt keeps you stuck, responsibility moves you forward. When you miss a day or mess up a plan, it's easy to fall into guilt, thinking, I ruined it, or I'm not disciplined enough. But guilt drains your energy. It leads to procrastination, avoidance, and self-doubt. Responsibility, on the other hand, is empowering. It says, I made a mistake and now I choose to do better. It brings your focus back to action rather than regret. And that's what builds the habit of bouncing back faster. The faster you bounce back, the more consistent you become, not because you avoid failure, but because failure loses its power to control you. You begin to see progress as a process, not a destination. And when you embrace the process, you become less fragile. You stop expecting perfection and you start expecting effort. That shift is what allows you to build sustainable success over time. You create space for growth, improvement, and self-compassion. And in that space, consistency flourishes. It's also important to remember that resilience grows stronger the more you practice it. Each time you bounce back, you gain mental toughness. Each time you recommit, you prove to yourself that failure is not the end. It's just a part of the path. You begin to build a reputation with yourself, one that says, I don't quit just because things get difficult. That inner reputation becomes your anchor. When others quit, when challenges increase, when motivation disappears, you stay grounded because you've been here before. You've fallen and risen enough times to know that you're capable of getting through anything. In the end, being consistent isn't about being flawless. It's about being resilient. It's about choosing to keep going, to learn from setbacks, and to honor your commitments even when things aren't going perfectly. The strength to return again and again is what transforms ordinary effort into extraordinary results. It's not how many times you fall that counts. It's how many times you rise that shapes who you become. Small, daily actions may not seem impressive at first glance. They often go unnoticed by others and even by ourselves. But over time, these small actions compound into powerful outcomes. It's easy to underestimate the value of what you do today, especially when the results don't show up immediately. But the truth is that the most meaningful progress in life comes not from big, dramatic events, but from the quiet accumulation of effort. Every time you choose to do the right thing, even in a small way, you are setting in motion a chain reaction that builds momentum and shapes your future. When you repeat an action consistently, even if it's small, you're making an investment. You might not see the return right away, but the effect is growing in the background. Just like saving a small amount of money each day adds up to something substantial over time, consistently investing effort into your goals adds up to massive growth. It's often said that consistency beats intensity. A short burst of effort might produce temporary results, but sustained, repeated action creates transformation. It's the person who shows up every day, who chips away at their goals bit by bit, who ends up achieving something meaningful. Most people get discouraged as they're focused only on the immediate outcome. They go to the gym and look for change in a week. They work on their craft and expect recognition right away. They change their habits and want to feel different overnight. But real success doesn't work that way. It happens in layers. Each day adds a brick. Each repetition lays a foundation. Eventually, that invisible progress turns into visible change. But it requires patience, trust, and commitment to the process. It requires a willingness to believe that what you do today, no matter how small, matters. The compound effect of small actions is not just about external results. It also changes you internally. Each time you show up and follow through, you build discipline. You train your brain to focus, to endure, and to persist. Even if you're tired, even if you're unmotivated, that small decision to stay consistent strengthens your mindset. You become more capable of doing hard things because you've proven to yourself that you don't need ideal conditions to act. That kind of mental strength isn't developed in one big moment. It's built through repetition, through the willingness to keep doing what matters without needing constant rewards. There's something powerful about looking back after 6 months or a year and realizing how far you've come. Not because you made one massive leap, but because you never stopped taking small steps. You didn't need to sprint. You just needed to keep walking those small steps taken daily, become habits. And once something becomes a habit, it takes less mental energy to do. You no longer have to push yourself to start. You simply do because it's now part of who you are. That's when growth becomes automatic. That's when you stop questioning your progress and start embodying it. It's also important to recognize that small actions create ripple effects. When you consistently show up in one area of life, it spills into other areas. If you start your morning with a consistent routine, you carry that focus into your work. If you take care of your body consistently, your energy improves, and so does your mood. If you dedicate a little time each day to your goals, you feel more confident, more in control, and more aligned with your values. The effects may begin in one place, but they expand outward. Consistency creates alignment between what you want and how you live. Even on days when progress feels invisible, it's happening. You're not just maintaining, you're reinforcing. You're proving to yourself that you're the kind of person who shows up. That proof adds up. It becomes a record you can look back on when doubt creeps in. It reminds you that you've done the work, even when it was hard. And that reminder keeps you moving forward, because success is not about one big push. It's about sustained effort. It's not about luck or genius. It's about refusing to give up just because things move slowly. The people who reach their goals are the ones who understand that every day counts. They don't wait for the perfect moment or massive progress to feel accomplished. They find pride in the process. They see the value in each small step. And in time, those steps take them to places others only dream of. Not because they were lucky, because they were consistent. They understood that greatness isn't found in a single act. It's earned in the quiet, committed choices made over and over again. That's the power of small, daily actions. They create the foundation for everything else. The truth is, lasting success doesn't come from occasional inspiration or rare moments of greatness. It's built through consistent effort day in and day out. When you force yourself to be consistent, regardless of motivation, regardless of how you feel, you begin to separate yourself from the majority. You develop habits that shape your identity. You design systems that drive discipline. You learn to rise after every setback. And you commit to the power of small actions that compound over time. Consistency is not just about doing the work. It's about becoming the kind of person who does the work no matter what. When you make that shift, when you stop waiting for perfect conditions and start showing up with purpose, that's when real transformation begins. Success doesn't come to those who try once. It comes to those who never stop. Force yourself to be consistent, and you will become unstoppable.